Hello! We are live yet again, and this is one of my authors' chats of the week. And I'll keep my eye out as this platform starts notifying people. For my co-host, we'll be talking about books, writing, publishing, and everything in between in just a few minutes, and we'll get things rolling. This week, since it is actually July 1st when we're filming this, I'm starting a new writing project and was very happy that starting day one was able to log in about 2,500 words, a little bit more actually, for the first chapter, because what I like to do for this particular project, which is a retelling based on the Greek myth of Atalanta, and this is the second book of a duology that I'll be releasing over the next couple years. What I try to do is anytime I sit down, I try to knock out a chapter, and they usually run anything from 1,900 words to, as you saw today, 25,000, maybe a little more. All just depends if we're doing more dialogue or action scenes or descriptive scenes, etc., so on. So I don't really go by word count. Traditionally, when I'm writing, I go by the number of pages that I'm trying to accomplish today, and I just kind of do it that way, knowing that when I reformat it later on prior to publication, that will change the number of pages as well, but I won't get into that too much unless people are interested in those sort of things. But like I said, keeping my eye out for my co-host. I saw that. Aha, there we are. Send the invite. See if we get things rocking and rolling, and make sure my volume is up on my end, but maybe not too high.
Hello?
Hello, I hear you. I do not see you outside of your kind of little logo, your icon, but that always seems to happen when I start these lives, so.
Okay, let's see what I can do about that.
Yeah, I wish I knew the trick. Since I always hosted, I've never had to kind of like figure that out on my own, or not lately at least. But might be something in the if you see the little three dots, I don't know for sure.
Okay.
Haha, there we go.
There we go. Now I'm live.
Hello. I mean, technically you were live before, but now we actually can see you, which is even better.
Okay, great. Yeah, I don't know why I'm incredibly nervous for this one, but it's been looming in my mind all day.
Oh no, I hope it. Well, this is just pretty conversational, and I don't know if you've watched any of my lives, but we just talk about books, writing, publishing, the things that we like to do, and if anybody in the comments pops up with some kind of bookish comment or question, usually I try to answer those. And I think depending on how our viewers log on, sometimes I may not see something, but you might. So if I'm missing, questions, just ask away or answer questions because I may not see those.
Okay, gotcha.
But outside of that, I'll just kick things off. And since you are my co-host today, I'll let you introduce yourself and what you write, and we'll go from there.
Okay. My name is Jame Moore. I go by the handle of James the Writer on TikTok, in the Book Talk universe. And I initially got into writing because my desire is to be a screenwriter.
Ooh.
But I decided to start off with something that I thought was easy, which would be to write a novel. And I quickly found out that easy doesn't apply to that. So it doesn't. There was so much hubris involved. I had no idea what I was doing, but I said to myself, oh, writing a screenplay, that's intimidating. But a book, yeah, I can just write a story down. That's going to be easy. I just put from what's in my head on paper, and it'll take me like 3 months. And 16 months later, I had my first draft. So as far as what I write, I get asked a lot, what genre do I write in? Do I do screenplays in or whatever? And I really don't think about genre. I don't. I think about the art of story. And the example I use all the time is, it doesn't matter whether my hero is a princess or a zombie. The story has to be good, engaging. If it's a hero story, there must be a goal and obstacles to that goal. There has to be a moment where it looks like it's not going to work out. This is never going to happen, and they triumph over that. So that's what I write. I write stories.
I like that. Well, let me ask you now, how many stories have you written so far? Because you said it took you 16 months to do the first draft, and honestly, when I was writing my first book, now albeit 4 years, there was a 4-year pause to this, but it took me 10 years from the idea before I figured out how to self-publish it. That was a long time, and of course, writing was part of that. So probably, a good chunk of that was, writing the first draft and figuring that out. So at this point in time, how many stories do you have out at this point?
Well, if you count stories, I would say that maybe there's a couple of dozen, because what I've been writing mostly is screen shorts and short stories. So you, if you work at it at all in those areas, you can be pretty prolific.
Mm-hmm.
That one story I was telling you about that I decided to write ended up being a novella,
I like
and
that.
there's a lot of controversy as to what a novella is as far as word count, but
Mhm.
it's safe to say it's in the 30,000 word range.
Yeah.
I've written a couple of novellas, one of which is published. The other one I'm still trying to tweak and sell. And so I guess the number would be in the as far as story count would be 20 to 30,
Nice.
because if you include all those short films I've written the scripts for or co-wrote with someone, and all the short stories that I'm always looking for short story opportunities, online contests, that sort of thing, and write something that's, I don't know, maybe 2,000 to 5,000 words.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I have quite a bit. And one thing I do want to make a point of, and I hope that this is the case for everybody who is interested in writing, is that my idea sheets, or I got like 4 or 5 pages of idea sheets, because the idea is for me to never ever finish that sheet. I'm supposed to die and pass that sheet along to somebody else, because you're supposed to write down every idea that pops into your head, and maybe you write it, maybe you don't, but you're supposed to have that source there.
Oh, I love that concept, even though it's a little morbid. But yes, no, I definitely understand that, because I have various places where I log in, like you said, anything from a very loose idea to maybe earlier kind of blocking in of like the plot lines of books that I know I'm not going to necessarily get to write for a number of years to come. And but it's because you don't want to forget those ideas. And even if you may not ever go back to them, it'll make you feel better that you took the time to note them down, because you don't want to come back at any point and be like, man, I know there was some great idea and I can't think of it, and now I don't know if I'll ever pop into my head again, and it's it's a little bit of a tragedy. So come up with your ideas. I like that.
Right, yeah. So let me ask you, of course, follow your page and your content. I love your content. I try I try to participate as much as possible in question of the day, which is, pretty thought provoking. If people listening out there are not familiar with question of the day, just hang around Katharine's site and look for the question of the day. So you write actual novels, it's a series, correct?
Yeah, predominantly I write series. I'm a series writer of novels, though I do have a series that's a novella series as well, and I have a few short stories floating around, some that I give out to people who sign up to like newsletter lists. I do have one on submission for my first anthology, crossing fingers that I get in. But so I try to dabble with various lengths of storytelling. I've never attempted screenwriting. That is so beyond my mental capabilities, because that is a dramatically different style of writing. It's like, I'm not a poet. I respect poetry. I enjoy reading it, but that is a different style of writing entirely. So it is
Mhm.
fascinating to me that you're able to jump between telling these novellas and short stories and then writing, script writing and stuff like that, because they are very different.
Yeah. What I would say the difference is I think that if you decided yourself to do a short film or something like that, I think you would catch on once that you get the concept of who your audience is.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you write a script, your audience is not the viewing audience of the movie or the film. Your audience is the director and the actors, because
Fair enough.
basically
Okay.
you're it's a collaborative effort. You're getting together with a team to tell a story with pictures. You're handling everything that's not pictures. So you're writing things down for the people to speak, the actors to speak, and for the director to grab that vision and put on film. So the writing becomes very different. Everything is in present tense because it's happening right then.
Hmm.
And there, you don't go for a necessarily for a turn of phrase or try to influence people with your, your prose,
Hmm.
because that's the actor's job to interpret, how to say this and how to walk across the room and how to grab that other person, that sort of thing. That all the descriptive things that you would normally put in a novel goes away,
Hmm.
but you have to lead the talent into whatever direction the director has as far as the vision for that film.
So when you write these scripts, and who or how do you try to query? Because I know in the literature thing you call it querying. You try to query for a literary agent who then hopefully gets you into a publishing house. So
Right.
when it comes to script writing, is it a similar process or is it very different? I actually don't know this.
Well, I don't want to misrepresent myself, but when I write, normally when I write a script, it's in an effort with a team that's already established. I don't know
Okay.
if you ever heard of the 48-hour film challenge. Have you ever heard of that?
It sounds familiar, but just explain it for anybody that may or may
Well,
not know. Again, not positive.
if you're into movies and filmmaking and have any interest in independent films, you have to investigate the 48-hour film challenge. And I'm not going to throw a lot of time into the explanation. I'm going to let you look it up yourselves. But the goal, and this is a worldwide event. I mean, it happens every year around the world, all different kinds of filmmakers. The goal is to create a movie, writing the script, doing the acting, doing the filming, doing the editing, polishing everything in a 48-hour period.
Wow, no
And
one's gonna sleep.
no, it's like an all-nighter. No one sleeps the first night because you got to get that script out. And you're calling people at 4 o'clock in the morning and say, "Hey, do you want to act in the movie?" So it's that kind of madness, and it's delightful madness to do that. So to answer your question, as far as what I write, it's usually with an effort like that, maybe in a contest, or if I um, write for just a team of people that we have the equipment and everything. We want to do our own thing. We write to put a movie together and maybe um, send it off to film festivals. And there are dozens and dozens of
Mhm.
legitimate film festivals that you can send short films to. They'll have certain criteria, the length of the film, or different genres, or that sort of thing. So right now, the goal is to in those efforts is to, get in the film festival and have somebody see the film, appreciate it. In the absolute best case scenario, somebody takes it to something that's a worldwide film festival. Who knows what happens? But there are a lot of local ones too. And I do have a couple of feature length scripts that I am trying to get known and put out there. And there's ways to get that done, to either um, participate in contests, but it really comes down to who you know. And from everything I've researched, you really have to be living out there in California and making contacts and talking to people if you want a feature length film script looked at. And I'm just too old in the game to actually do that. If it was 40 years earlier, I probably pack up, go to California, wait tables, and see who I can get to read my script. But now I basically write them for myself. But in that one in a million chance that somebody that sees it and has the connections to be able to turn it into something, I'm going to keep writing them.
Have you ever taken any of these, or the group you have worked with in the past, ever taken your smaller films, the ones that you've created for like the 48-hour stuff, And after you've gone to the film festival bracket, have you ever put them in places like YouTube or other kind of visual platforms for people to find, discover, and build up an audience?
Oh, most definitely. We do, I've worked with teams where we put little snippets on maybe Instagram to point to the YouTube page where we have the full-fledged film. I myself have I created a website of the scripts that I've written that had actually gotten turned into films. And I, try to promote that as much as I can, when I run into someone
Whoop. I think,
or, talk up a film.
yeah. And I don't know if your end's going to be a little glitchy. I know I have a little pop-up storm outside, so just pre-warning, if I freeze for any reason, it may be that. But that's great, because I always love when people are creative in ways that allow them to be discovered, to be continuously found, even, for things like YouTube is a great platform. You can build a big following, and if you reach certain thresholds, then you can actually get some financial kickback and, from stuff like that. And that can kind of help you going forward. So I'm glad that you're taking advantages of that and creating websites and everything, because some people don't think of all the different ways they can connect with the reader, the viewer, the whomever, you want your audience to be.
Yeah, it is a challenge, and I have to admit, when I started getting into this profession, this game of being a writer, I grossly underestimated the amount of effort. If you want to have any kind of real success, it's really a genuine effort that you have to put out there to make yourself known.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if you just want to work in a small market, or if you want to be world famous. It doesn't matter. It's still a lot of work that you have to do to promote yourself. And the thing that I find is interesting, as a writer myself, I love duality. In a lot of stories, there's a lot of things that seem like it should be one way, but it's another. And at least the people that I've met, most of the people that are writers, and especially acting talent, that sort of thing, they're normally introverts. A lot of people are introverts. They don't like to boast about themselves, and yet you have to do that. You have to boast about yourself and your work to get it done. So there's a duality there. But a lot of people are successful and able to overcome that. But yeah, I think, and I see a lot of people on this platform, and TikTok, Book Talk, whatever you want to call it, people that are suffering from imposter syndrome. They doubt themselves. What if nobody likes what I'm doing? That sort of thing. So whenever I post, I try to do talk about things that are encouraging, because the mistake is always that you don't think enough of yourself, other than the other way around.
And there's so many things of when people are dealing with imposter syndrome, and maybe their first time, and they're very nervous, and that's adding to it. And guess what? I'm an extreme extrovert, and I'm was extremely nervous about my first book too. It happens to everybody. And when you hear that encouragement and have other people in the writing community trying to say, you got this, let me help you out if you want, or whatever it is, it's very nice to see. So I'm glad you're doing that as well for people, because I know there are viewers out there, your followers, that are probably very, very appreciative for that little bit of encouragement, because we all need that at some times. Now,
yes, most definitely. And I try to do that every single time I hear somebody even attempting to write anything, always willing to encourage them and read what they have to say and give constructive criticism.
Yes, constructive criticism. And I think that's very important, to emphasize, because there are a lot of people who don't know what that means. And so they either pick on the bad, not necessarily glamorize, but talk about the good. But when it comes to constructive criticism, that's a good skill to develop, where you can say, hey, here's something I like about it, here's something I didn't like, but here's a way I think you might want to improve it, or consider doing this in a way where it's not, 2 thumbs down.
Yeah, most definitely. I don't know what your experience was when you started out, but when I got into the game initially, of course, I went to friends and family. Says, I decided to, do this little bit of writing. What do you think about what I've written so far? And with my family, it was, oh, this is great. Well, what's great about it? Oh, it's just all great. And even that's nice to hear, but it's not helpful. You
No.
know. And you have to be very selective on who you choose to get your to try and pursue the constructive criticism from. It's good to be talking with other people who are fellow writers who have gone through it or is going through it along with you, and they can actually give you the mechanics as far as, well, you might want to say this, or this was said well, but you can do better here, that sort of thing, which is actually constructive.
Yeah, and that's a rule of thumb for anybody who listens to this and is very, very new to the writing scene. They're typically recommendable not to go to your family and friends because
Hmm.
as the people who help you with the editing and finding out the flaws of the beta readers and alpha reader stage, etc., so on, because typically they want to support you and they usually over sell the good, and then they don't talk about the bad because they feel like it's going to hurt you, break your heart or make you feel sad, and they don't want to do it because they want to support you. So you do need to find people, typically people that may not know you personally, to be the ones to say, hey, here's the down and dirty parts of it. Here's what I like. Here's what I don't like. Here's, again, the things that I see that you can fix in different ways, and get that feedback that you need to help your writing, your manuscript, whatever you're doing, your screenplay, etc., and make it the best it can be, because you want it to be the best it can be, especially before you release it to the world.
Definitely, that's an excellent point. So, so let me ask you this now: as you, what is your experience as far as the you self publish,
Yes.
and uh, tell me about that experience. With comparing when you started your first book and your first efforts compared to now, as far as what you have to do when you self publish.
Well, I guess that's a very big question and a very long answer in many different ways. I have to figure out how to structure this. But yeah, for I think a lot of people, especially who go through self-publishing, there is going to be a floundering around for a little while, just trying to figure everything out in your system and the formula and your writing voice. And part of that could be any type of writer. For me, my first book, as I kind of mentioned a little earlier, it took me 10 years from the conception of the idea to publishing it. 4 year, a little bit of hiatus, but a lot of that was just trying to learn things. And I'm a person who keeps templates on everything. So as soon as I kind of had like, okay, this is my processes, I jot that down. Or these are the websites I'm trying to use to publish. And this is the order of events that I need to pay attention to. And then each book and each project I've worked on since then, I build out, I adjust, I tweak. So nowadays, and part of this is, I hate to say thanks to COVID, but during that time when I had more time and energy to focus on my writing, that got me a little bit of ahead of the game. So I'm able now to kind of cycle different projects. So I'm always writing something new, editing something else, marketing my backlist, format it, and prepping for launch of a different project. And so it does feel that I'm releasing a lot more books quickly and more efficiently. And there's a little bit of a truth to that, because definitely I'm writing faster and, have a better confidence in my writing voice and the materials that have access to and the programs I have access to. But also in part, I've figured out just the structure that works for me, and everybody's so different. People who write in the morning, people who are in the middle of the night, people who do 20-minute sprints, others that write for 2 weeks straight and don't sleep. I don't recommend that one though. But everybody's different. So when it comes to nowadays, I'm far more confident knowing the resources that I have available, and also better at asking questions, because it goes to, when you don't know what you don't know, how are you going to ask what you don't know to ask? And so it's nice now that I've built out a community of other writers and authors, because I can see someone do something very neat, and I'm like, wait, can you tell me how to do that? Can you pass me along, or where did you get this done? And it's really nice to have that back and forth conversation with other people to help projects get going. And so nowadays I'm able to do a lot more writing wise. I don't know if that helped answer, because that was a very big question.
Yeah. I apologize.
Answer specific questions.
Yeah, I apologize for the largeness of the question, but I think that gives me what I wanted, a kind of a visual of what you experience as far as the type of writing that you do. And before we go too much further, I see a comment from Maurice, the author. If you're still on, Maurice, I want to point him out as one of those real encouragers out there. I don't know if you're familiar with Maurice, the author.
I am. Actually had him on here
excellent.
About a month ago, 3 weeks ago. But yeah, I recently met him, and such a lovely person.
Yes, his daily reminders to authors, I think it's probably, it's a great lifeline for people that is encouraging and constructive, just like we were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So
yes, and I'm glad you pointed out that he was here a little earlier on. I don't know if he's still on at this moment, but yes, he definitely is one of those uplifters, and I love authors who are uplifters. I have a few that I follow just because you want that, you need that. Or there are definitely people who use their platform to kind of stimulate ideas. I do my questions of the day because they're fun. Sometimes they're a little more writing forward. Others are just for readers to have fun explaining, why they like characters, why they like certain genres, and et cetera, so on. But it's just fun, again, building that community. Now, let's go back to your earliest story. And the one that took you a little while to write. I think you mentioned that it turned into a novella in the end. What is that one about? Like, who are the characters, and can you give me a little idea of that particular one? I know you've written a lot.
Well, as far as my very first effort, so novella that I have not sold yet, and you can probably attest to this. Your very first effort might not be your best, as you learn the process and that sort of thing. So although I'm proud that I got this story accomplished, I would say it's not my best. I'm going to preface that. But my first story was about, it's called, it's my main character, her name is Charlotte. Okay. And the story is based in the 70s in the South. Charlotte lives in North Carolina, and the title is Charlotte, the Price of Vengeance. And what happens is Charlotte is a middle-aged Southern Belle type housewife. She's got 3 sons. The last one is going off to college, and she's wondering what is she going to do with the rest of her life, because this is back in the day where a lot of women in the South, their main thing was tending to that house and raising kids and that sort of thing, and that's what she did, and she did well. But she's wanting more. She's done with raising kids. What is going to be next? And she has one of her dear best friends that lives down the street from her, named Carol Ann, who is married to a guy that's not so nice. And it's suspected that when Carol Ann is found in an auto accident, visiting her aunt, that her husband has something to do with it. So everybody else says it's an accident, but she decides, she knows that there's something fishy going on, and she goes and investigates what is possible. And don't want to give it away in case I do get a chance to sell it, but it's about Charlotte's transformation from Southern Belle housewife to gun-toting investigator to figure out what's what as far as what happened to her dear best friend.
Wow, no, I love that. I love that premise. And but yes, I definitely go back to your point in the where your first book, your first story, your first project, whatever you're working on, it's most likely not going to be your best work, and you really don't want it to be your best work, because each thing you write, you want to get better.
Right.
You want to, challenge yourself to improve, and you want to continue. So theoretically, no matter when you publish something, if it's the first one, it theoretically should be your worst one if you think of it in that way.
That's right. That's right. That's an excellent point.
Yeah, I know that's the case for my first book. And my first book, that's the one that took me about a decade to kind of figure out how to publish. And then I didn't know anything about marketing, so then it took me a lot longer to figure out what to do. And eventually, you know, started getting the awards and the recognition. But even still, if I go back and read it, I'm like, ooh, I would change that. I would update that. I would just approach this a little differently, because the way I'm writing now is a little tighter, a little cleaner. You know, the pacing's gotten just a little better. And just, again, the way I'm approaching stories now has evolved a bit. So I think that's the case for everybody. So at some point, especially those perfectionists out there, at some point you just have to say, okay, let me get something out. We're going to start moving on to a new project after that.
Exactly. So tell me about what your very first effort, your self-publishing effort, what that story was about.
So my first book is called Sarah's Claws, and it's the first book. It ended up being a 4-book series. I intended it to be a standalone because I wanted to use my first book figuring everything out, knowing that I would need time to do that, knowing that I needed time to figure out my writing voice and the marketing, the publishing, and how the heck I do any of it. And before I went to some of more of my passion projects, yet going through that writing process of the first book, ended up realizing it is a 4-book series. But that one, since I consider myself a high fantasy, second world fantasy author, so right now almost all the stories I've ever written are set on worlds that are not Earth. So a little more on the Tolkien-esque and Game of Thrones and those kind of side of things, rather than urban fantasy. And my first book is a new adult dark fantasy about a kingdom on the verge of war, and humans and shapeshifters who live in the kingdom have to decide if they are able to put aside their differences in order to fend off a greater threat. And there's dark prophecies and the idea of war gods, and of course this kingdom that's on the cusp of being conquered by another group of people. And so that's kind of the premise of that series. But it was a lot of fun to write, and as all writers know, it's stressful. You figure things out, you tweak things, and if you start getting into the writing process, especially once you start knowing, are you someone who plans out your whole story? Are you someone that just sits down and just starts writing? I'm a little bit in between. For me, it's a lot of fun because there are certain things that write themselves into being. And so having that first book, and even early on experiencing all of a sudden I have a character that I was not expecting to exist, and it stuck through this book series till the very end. I was just like, well, that was fun. It's an adventure.
Excellent. So I might be putting you on the spot with this next question, but I gotta ask you this question after you told me about your first book, because it's something that I don't do much of with the type of writing that I do, and that is world building. I know that in the type of work that the type of writing you do, that world building is essential. So for the people that might hear this, that want to get started in that realm, that sort of thing, what is world building, and what is good world building? Another big question, right?
Nebulous question, because the answer is just like that. And that all depends, again, on the story that you're trying to create, and to what extent you're going to explore the world. You always want to make the worlds, especially if you are a high fantasy fiction author, kind of a little bit more like me, you want to make them feel rich and lived in. And that means even if you don't deep dive in like the politics or the cultures, you want to at least give enough implication that those exist, that there's enough history that has been, so it does feel real and believable, as much as a fantasy or as science fiction or etc. So it can be believable. But so part of that world building is figuring out not just the characters, but the world they exist in and how that has affected the character's existence and back and forth. And you also have to determine how much of the world you get to see, because there are certain people, one of my favorite indie authors, and he's on here, Jason Duro, his first book doesn't really move locations. It's pretty much in this one city for a huge book, but he gives so much rich detail and culture and this kind of implication that there's a vast world. It's been around for a while. There's so much intricacy with the politics and the kingdom, etc., so on. But you don't have to move your characters around to visually see that if you just filter enough in. And as an author, you do a little bit more prepping and planning. Typically, what I've heard when I've talked to other authors about world building, we plan a lot more than we ever show. Now, it doesn't mean you have to have your whole world map or, down to the T, but you do need to know the region and maybe beyond that a little bit. And if you have an idea, if you have a series, where it's going to go, kind of having an idea of that and kind of solidifying as much as you need for the readers to, again, you want them to enjoy the journey and not get knocked out of it. So if something's strange or doesn't make sense or doesn't feel like it has its own depth, and again, I guess I'm using richness tonight, but that dimensionality, that's what you need to kind of work on.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for that viewpoint because, with what I write, I have never endeavored to write anything in the fantasy realm to make up different worlds, cultures, that sort of thing, involve magic, that sort of thing. Maybe that's something I'll tackle down the road when I feel more confident.
Hey, it's fun to do, but on the other hand, there is something to say about creating stories and fitting them in our world. I mean, you kind of have to do that a little bit, like if you are writing our world, but a different point of history, especially a point of history that you may not have lived in. That's still a little bit of that creativity. And there's the research versus like creating a world. You're doing the research of our world to make it, again, have the terminology, have that believability, have, utilize what you need to utilize in order for people to kind of go into that new time.
Yeah. Yeah. And you touched upon a word that I think is vital for people who want to endeavor to write is doing the research. And
Yes.
how important that is. If you don't do your research, then you can quickly lose an audience and all credibility in your story. And that first story that we were talking about, there was a lot of research that I had to do in the time period.
Yeah.
I had to in describing the cars of the 70s and what people drove, what people wore, houses they lived in, and I eventually got into the world of firearms of of that period. Who used what sort of firearms? What were the best ones for certain goals when you're if you're going to be a private detective or what people would get their hands on the street, that sort of thing. And I found that to be one of the most interesting parts of things because basically I'm a student. I have a chemical engineering degree, and I've been in school and studied things all my life. So I'm happy with having I have to find out about this subject and digging deep and going on Google and going into the library and finding out about things. And you have to do that if you're going to write stories.
Oh, yes. And it doesn't matter if you're writing, again, a little bit maybe a historical period or period novel versus a second world high fantasy, kind of like I do, because there's so much research that goes into it. Like half the day when I'm working on my writing, I'm putting new words on paper. Great. On the other half, Google's up. I have books out. I'm going back and forth. I'm creating my spreadsheet of notes and timelines of everything that I'm trying to utilize as part of my research to write fantasy.
Right.
So it does play a very big part, I should say.
Yeah. And you can kind of tell when you read in certain, not everything that gets put out there is good necessarily. And you can tell, who's done their homework and who hasn't. At least, I kind of get a feeling of that. I'm part of a podcast that we do book reviews.
Fun.
And yeah, and the our main stick is that we look for books with strong female characters. That's the main thing that we look
I
for.
love myself strong female characters.
Yeah, and we always go for bestsellers because we want to have the biggest audience possible. People that have already read the books, and we want to try to generate discussion, that sort of thing. And And we've been doing this for around, 6 or 7 years. And something that astounds me, and maybe, you can explain this to me because we're astounded in our little group. Time after time, we'll find a best-selling. I mean, people are just raving about these books, and we'll review it, and we just think they're awful. I mean, they're just poorly done as far as structure, that sort of thing. So many things are telegraphed as far as what's going to happen. Nobody wants to know who done it in chapter 2 if you got a 35 chapter book. So why do you think it is that, I mean, and maybe this is not your opinion. I don't want to throw an opinion on you as far as what you read and what you've discovered out there. But it seems like there's a lot of stuff out there that people are just eating up and just think it's the best thing. And when you analyze it, it really doesn't hold up as far as the structure of story.
Well, I think in part that's it's potentially one of the downfalls of the traditional publishing bracket. And I'm a person that's like, hey, there's pros and cons of any kind of publishing, so please understand that. But one of the downfalls of the traditional publishing industry, their business. They're here as a business. They treat it as a business. So a lot of what they look at, what they pick up, is they're doing calculations on what is trending, what people want, where things are going. If one formula works, and I'm using the word formula, other people will pop up pretty much doppelganger books and series all over in whatever is trending at the time. And that's, again, because they're a big industry. They're trying to hit the trends, reach as many people as possible. And then when the trends and fads fade, they're trying to quickly move on to what they're predicting will be the next big thing. When it comes to indie publishing, there's a lot more creativity because what the traditional publishing, it sounds like when I've talked to people, want and are looking for is very niche down because it is a business and this is what they're looking for and this is only what they're looking for today. Tomorrow may be a little different, but that's what it is. And when it comes to some of these other newer stuff, especially indie, we're not niche down in those little bubbles. So there is a little more creativity. But it's down to the effort of each independent author. So some authors put all the effort in that is needed to make sure their book is good quality, what it needs to be. Other people are just publishing really rapidly because they can. And so it's harder to establish that level of quality in the indie side of it because there is no necessary standard that any particular author has to read in any particular checklist point, cover design, editing, et cetera, so on. So both of them have flaws that could affect enjoyability of the read. If you have a poorly edited story, it's not going to be great, even if you have a very creative idea and plot line. And the same thing with traditional publishing. If you like one book, great, but then you read another book by a different person and it's pretty much the same and you read another one, it gets a little boring after the time. It's not exciting. You can kind of start predicting the flow of it because they're going after what is a trending theme and storyline. And so I think in part of it, it's when you're reading bestsellers, that's because they're coming through a lot of the traditional houses of big marketing, et cetera, so on. That's great, but they're catered down to very niche themes that they're gunning for. So they may be feeling more predictable because of that.
Okay. That's kind of similar to what we've been discussing in our little circle in the group. Me personally, I think that and I don't have the view in the publishing world that you may have because I've only had a couple of failed self-publishing efforts that, didn't really, I underestimated the work involved and the dedication.
A lot of work.
A lot of work. But it seems to me that there's a sliding scale between art and product when you look at a book, and that in a lot of cases you give up one for the other. If you want to produce a product of what people want to read and what's popular and what people are looking for, you might be giving up a little bit of your artistic vision in a story. And if you go too artistic, you lose a lot of people because it's not the popular thing. I think a combination of that phenomenon along with the lemming effect, I call it the lemming effect. If you have the right people say, oh, this book is fantastic, and then to be cool and look intellectual, you got to say it's fantastic too, or you actually convince yourself that it is fantastic because your intellectual friend said it is, then it ends up, something that's marketed well doesn't necessarily end up being a really great story, but it's because of marketing and word of mouth and skill in marketing that it becomes a bestseller. And that might be a jaded view, that can be disproved, but it's in the back of my head when I read some of these things.
And I'm sure that does play a part to some extent. And it also, I think, part of it is, are you really the target audience? Just because it says bestseller, is it necessarily supposed to be written for you? And if you're not the target audience, that also could be another reason why you may not like it as much as whomever the author and the publishing house and everything, the marketing team is trying to aim for. And that can also affect it, because there are definitely some books that are very high quality books, but because they're not necessarily my interest, I don't necessarily go and pick them up. Yeah, periodically I'll pick them up and maybe enjoy them to an extent, but that doesn't mean I'm going to jump on that genre or anything like that, because it's not for me personally. I like fantasy. I like, take me to another world, let's ride dragons and fly on griffins and all this kind of stuff. I like that. I do. And I know my taste, and I don't necessarily feel swayed personally if a book is a bestseller or not. If the book is indie versus trad versus a small publishing house, that doesn't matter to me. It's does it hook me based on the pitch? Does it hook me based on the blurb, etc.? What is it that draws my attention? So, and then hopefully it was a worthwhile read.
Right. So, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, so since the hour's starting to speed by, there are a couple of things I always try to make sure I ask, just because if this platform's nice, I'll repurpose this on my YouTube channel, put all your contact information I can find it down below for people to find it and discover you going forward on your writing journey. With that said, for all your writing process projects, is there a good place for people to learn about them, find them, discover them? I know you mentioned a YouTube channel and a website, or that kind of thing. Where can people find your writing endeavors that you're willing to share at this point?
The best way for that to be done is I have a link tree.
Love it.
Set up, and that points to the website I set up for the book that I have that's still available on Amazon, small publishing house. It connects to the podcast the wife and I do, the website I got set up for the scripts that I've had turned into actual films. It connects to all of that, so I can provide that in as a link. But I'll just say it out here that it's, and I'm reading this off of my card. It's link tr.ee/storyteller6465. So if you go to that Linktree link, then you'll be able to go from there from that Grand Central Station to all the shenanigans that James is involved in.
I love that. I want to assume, but I never also want to assume that on the Linktree that you have available, people can find. Are you on other socials for the point of connecting with writing and connecting with potential readers, viewers? And if so, what are your other socials outside of Book Talk?
Outside of Book Talk, I have an Instagram, and mainly that's like a personal one. That's really not really geared towards writing. But I would say that the two websites that I have set up, one for the book and one for the screenwriting, the movies, those are the main areas where I really give an invitation for anybody to contact me through the email address that's going to be posted at both of those sites. If you just want to chat about movie making, storytelling, writing, that sort of thing, let's get together. Let's talk online. We're still getting together the YouTube channel. The wife and I are going to be building a YouTube channel based on the podcast that we do. So it's kind of like a stay tuned situation for that.
Nice.
So yeah, so those are the other areas.
I love that. And it is nice that you're able to create a podcast. Outside of this, this is like my version of podcast. I've loved being on other people's podcasts for like interview purposes or chatting about, the writing or the publishing side of things, but never done something like that on my own. I just kind of film here and then repost elsewhere, share the content. And, but that is really fun that you're being able to do something like that. And again, have another way of talking about what you're passionate about. And that's exciting. What is your podcast name, by the way?
Oh, the name of the podcast, and I'll have to say a disclaimer right off, is not really about writing.
Okay.
It's the podcast is about an interracial couple in their 60s just mouthing off about the world, and it's called More Shenanigans. Yeah, it's called More Shenanigans. And to tell you the truth, I mean, you would think that the guy that's the writer in the family would be the one to come up with this idea. No, this was the wife's idea. She said, let's get a microphone. Let's do a podcast online. Cause and she's creative too. She wants to be a photographer. Yeah. And not weddings or anything like that, but macro photography and landscapes, that sort of thing. And, if you told me when I was a kid that I could have my own radio show, I would just told you that but basically that's what a podcast is.
Yep, it is.
You have your own radio show or even a TV show. If we go to the camera, we haven't gone to the camera yet. Ours is audio, but we get to set up our little radio station on a weekly basis, talk about whatever we want. And it's interesting, the number of countries that actually listen to what we have to say. It's astounding that we're international.
It is. I mean, our world is far smaller than, it used to be, if you know what I mean. Like the way we are connected to each other, it's so wild that when I started doing these lives with other authors and bookish people, that I was able to talk to people literally across the world. Obviously, the timing has to work correctly for people to be, are we doing it when you're waking up or I am? But it's just so neat that we're able to reach people on a global level when only, decades before, even it wasn't like that. So it is amazing.
Yeah. And I'm sure that you feel this, I see you as a very successful author. You have series of books. I'm serious. You have series of books that you talk about that out there. And there are people right now in their library in another country sitting around with your book in their library. That must be do you reflect on that every once in a while? Do you sit back and say, man, I'm all over the world?
It is. It's always wowing to me. And I hope it maintains that kind of awe. I'm going to cough for a second. Excuse me. But yeah, hopefully I always maintain that sense of awe when it comes to stuff like that and doesn't, wear thin, because it is such a really neat thing. The first time someone comes up and it's like, I've read your book. I'm like, oh, it's the first time you get someone emailing you. And it's just like, I read this. First time someone who comes up to you at a live event. These are those little wins that celebrate them, acknowledge them, be happy about them, because not everybody gets to those thresholds and it has those experiences. And it's a little mind blowing that does happen.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't had that exact experience, but I have had a couple of, I do have one book that's out there that's published on Amazon. And when I saw the first review, that wasn't something that I prompted, not a family member that put a review out there, that in Reddit, that somebody, actually got what I was trying to say. I made a connection to a total stranger. It's kind of a thrill.
It is. Now, am I allowed to know what the title of that particular book is?
Oh, yes, you are allowed to know. And I'll tell you a story behind that book. The title of the book is Home, HOM, which is the main character's name. Ah. And that book was written by accident. And you may ask, how does a book get written by accident? Well,
yeah, I was about to.
Yeah, this was early on in my storytelling career, and I was eager. I just wanted to be involved and be a part of a community that's putting things together. And I found a group online. They wanted to put together a animated series, and they needed a couple of writers for it. People to be a writing team. Now, that effort fell apart because, one person's in Great Britain, the other person's in South Africa, whatever. And the leader that was trying to hold things together, but it just didn't work out. But the guy contacted me separately after, we went defunct. And he said, well, James, I want to develop a video game. He's the kind of person that writes code. And he said, well, you write the story. Excuse me. And I said, sure, I'll write the story. And I'm thinking he's talking about writing a short story around the character that they have some kind of basis for the video game, something that would be like, a couple of thousand words. And when I got done with that, he says, no, give me more. Tell me more about this character. So the story just got extended further and further until all of a sudden I have this novella that's 36,000 words. And we had an agreement that, the video game is his. Whatever he gets from it, it all totally belongs to him. And the story that I write totally belongs to me. So I have this story in my hand that I didn't intend to write. It's 36,000. I think it's a complete story. So I say I'll just market it around. So I edited it. I was blessed by being able to run into a couple of people that did editing on the copy editors on the side and let them put it through the ringer, and we can do a whole show on the editing process. It's essential if you want to. Yeah, it's painful, but it has to be done. Mm-hmm. And after doing that a couple of times, I found a publisher. World Castle Publishing decided to pick me up and published the book. They did the cover and everything, but they said all the marketing belonged to me. I had to do all the promotion. So I ask people on this platform sometimes, I say, do you think I'm an indie author because I have to do all my own work as far as, promoting my book and everything? Some people say emphatic yes, some people say emphatic no, but one way or the other, I kind of see myself as somebody that's in the trenches and working to get themselves looked at. So that's the book. It's called Home, and by Jame Moore and Amazon. And if anybody decides to pick it up or take a look at it, a review is always appreciated. An honest review is always appreciated.
Yes, that's very true. And for readers, the joy of reading is a wonderful thing. But remember, if you read a book and enjoy it, say it. If you read a book you don't like it, that's fine to say too. Again, constructive criticism is the best. But leave your honest reviews, because authors need reviews, and they don't have to be perfect. They just need to be honest and real. And I'm very bad about leaving reviews. And I know how important they are for people. So I will put my hand up and say I'm one of the people who are bad about leaving reviews after I read a book. I admit that. It's a flaw.
Yes. Well, for a writer, reviews is sunshine and manure. We need both to grow. So whether it's sunshine or whether it's manure, we need it both. And just really quickly about the book Home, it's the publishing company actually told me what my genre was, because I just wrote a story. I don't think about genre. They say it's a YA sci-fi dark fantasy thriller.
Woo!
I didn't know that. Apparently, that's what it is. And the premise is Home is a young man who is raised by a clandestine government agency to take advantage of his supernatural powers of telekinesis and being able to talk with angels and demons.
Wow.
So it's all about his escape from that institution, along with three other teenagers with different powers, and how they find faith and family in each other in this story.
That is interesting. I see a comment also. That sounds interesting. Yes, it does. I was like, that is interesting. So yes, never forget to pitch and promote your own work. Don't forget about that. But yes, you said that one's available on Amazon at this moment?
That's correct. Now, if you do a search, initially, if you put HOM by Jame Moore, they'll try to get you to find something called HOME. Just say, nope, I really want HOM by Jame Moore, and they'll take you to the link.
I like that. And also, what formats is it available? Ebook, paperback, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I was really surprised when I hooked up with World Castle. They say, well, certain books you have to have a certain length before you're hardcover.
Mhm.
And I said, okay, I understand that. This is a novella, but they actually did a hardcover of this book in addition to paperback, and it's an ebook.
I like that. Yeah, I'm definitely a person, I prefer physical books. Of course, you see some of the examples of mine behind me, but I do love the physical holding book. But there's benefits, kind of like anything. There's benefits in all formats. And so I was always wanting to know what formats people have access to when it comes to the people I chat with here. And since we're also hitting at that end of the hour, one final question I want to ask you, and for anybody who's listening, is there anything you wanted to cover today that we didn't get to cover? Any questions that you had that you haven't been able to ask yet? Any announcements you want to make? This is that time.
Well, I'll say this one announcement really quick. Before I saw that you were looking for, interviews, setting up your schedule and everything, I must admit that even though my little moniker on Book Talk is "if you're a writer, write something today," I say that every time, not to put pressure on people, but to encourage. Lately, I hadn't been doing a lot of writing, shamefully. I kind of fell out of it. Different circumstances, what's happening in the world, really I allowed to get to me more than it should have. But I'm back in the game, and I am working on a sequel to Home. So that's my that's my current large project. So I encourage the people out there, if you are being affected by what's going on in the world right now, need a little bit of encouragement, let me just tell you that if you really feel like you should be doing this writing thing, don't let little distractions like your government dissuade you from doing what you're supposed to be doing on this earth. And just do some writing. And it can be just for yourself, or it can be part of your large project. Just do it, because like any kind of exercise, you get better and better the more you do it.
And writing for many people is therapeutic too. And people find joy in just the act of creating something, or putting a story down, or venting just through the words they type. So it can be a way for people to kind of remove themselves from their stretchers and find peace of mind. So hopefully that's the case for most people out there, because you want to love what you write. You want to enjoy the process. Maybe not all parts all the time, but you want to enjoy the process.
Right.
I mean, that's a big thing of why a lot of us do what we do.
Exactly.
Well, I want to say thank you so much for hanging out with me this past hour. I've loved being able to talk with you face to face in a way, and get to know you and your various writing projects. That's so fascinating that you have everything from, for anybody who's jumped on, anything from the physical novellas all the way to writing movie scripts for mini movies that are available for people to find and enjoy. So I think that's absolutely fantastic. And just make sure you take those moments to reflect on all your achievements so far, because that's amazing.
Yeah, I really, and I enjoyed doing it. I think I was meant to do it. I've enjoyed the last hour. It's great talking to you. You put people at ease. I was super nervous for some reason. I don't know why, but
I'm not that mean.
I really enjoyed our little chat, and I'll be looking forward to the next, few people that you'll have online.
Yeah, and if you ever want to do this again, just reach out. As you know, I try to schedule in advance, because that's my life. But I'd love to have you on again, maybe after you get to the next stage and release your sequel at that point. That would be kind of fun, and do kind of celebratory chat for that. But I really do appreciate that you took the time out and hung out with me, and I look forward to following you some more in the future.
Okay, great. Thanks again for having me, and you have a good night.
You too, and thank you for everybody who's been listening. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.